In this video from IT Free Training, I will be creating a Relying Party Trust between the IT Free Training Federation Server and the HighCost Training Federation Server. This trust is created on the IT Free Training side. I will now change to my computer running Windows Server 2012 and get started. The initial install of Active Directory Federation services has already been completed on this computer. In order for it to be used with other Federation servers, it needs to be configured. To do this, I will first open Server Manager from the Quick Launch bar, and then from the Tools menu, select the option for ADFS Management. Once ADFS Management is open, I will expand down to Relying Party Trusts, right-click it, and select the option for Add Relying Party Trust. This will start the Add Relying Trust wizard. Once I press Start to get past the welcome screen, on the next screen I need to determine how information about the Relying Party Trust will be obtained. The first option, Import Data about the Relying Party published online or on a local network, will attempt to contact another Federation server using the network to obtain the information that it requires in order to create the trust. This is the simplest option, but does require a network connection between the two servers. The second option, Import Data about the Relying Party from a file, will obtain this information from a file exported from the other Federation server. You would use this option if you do not have a direct connection between the two servers. For example, perhaps the other Federation server is on another company's network, and there is a firewall between the two servers that prevents the connection. The last option, Enter Data about the Relying Party manually, allows the administrator to enter details about the trust manually. This requires the administrator to know all this information, and generally, if possible, it is best to use one of the other options. To understand where this data comes from, I will cancel out of the wizard and go back to the Admin tool. In the Admin tool, under Service, is a container called Endpoints. Endpoints are used by Active Directory Federation services to transfer information or provide a particular service. For example, an endpoint may be used to accept a claim on the server. If I scroll down to the bottom, notice the section Metadata. This is the endpoint that the other server contacts in order to obtain information from this server. Now that we know where the server gets the information from, I will now run the Relying Party Trust wizard again. Once I am past the welcome screen of the wizard, on the next screen I will enter in the fully qualified domain name of the HighCost Training Federation Server. In order for this server to be resolved, on the IT Free Training Network I have configured conditional forwarders pointing to the HighCost Training DNS servers. Once I press Next, the other server will be contacted. Notice that I will get an error message. The server has attempted to open a secure connection using SSL. However, it was not able to. In order for the secure connection to be created, the root CA for each network needs to be exported and imported on the other network. Once this is done, this will allow a secure connection to be made between the two networks to transfer the metadata. To do this, I will exit out of these windows, and then move the mouse pointer up to the top right-hand side of the screen to open Charms. Once Charms is open, I will enter in MMC. Once MMC is open, I will select the File menu and then select the option Add Remove Snap-in. The snap-in that I'm interested in is Certificates, which I will select from the list and add it. When I attempt to add the snap-in, I will be presented with a dialog box asking which certificates I want to manage. In this case, I will select Computer Account and press Next. The next and last screen will ask me which computer I want to manage certificates on. In this case, I will accept the default option of Local Computer and press Finish. Now that the certificate snap-in has been added, I can press OK to close the window. This network has an Enterprise CA installed on it. In order for the other network to trust certificates issued from that Enterprise CA, I need to export its root certificate. This certificate can be found under Trusted Root Certification Authorities and then under Certificates. Once a certificate container is opened, I need to locate the root certificate and select it. Once selected, I will right-click and select Export under All Tasks to start the Export Certificate wizard. Once I'm past the Welcome screen, on the next screen I need to select which format to export the certificate in. In this case, I will accept the default option of DER and move on to the next screen of the wizard. On the next screen, I need to enter in a file name to export the certificate to. In this case, I will save the certificate to removable flash media that I've plugged into the computer. Once the file name has been entered, I can complete the wizard and the certificate will be exported. Now that the certificate has been exported, I can remove the USB media from this computer. I will now change the server in the HighCost Training domain that is running Active Directory Federation services. I next need to install the certificate from ITFreeTraining on this server to allow a secure connection to be established between the two servers. To do this, I will put the USB media in this computer and open it in Windows Explorer. You can see the exported certificate. To add it to the local certificate store, I will double-click it to open it and then press the button Install Certificate to start the Certificate Import Wizard. Once the wizard opens, I will select the option Local Machine to store the certificate to be used with this computer. Once I move on to the next screen, I need to select which certificate store to store the certificate in. I will accept the default option, which will automatically decide which store to place the certificate in, rather than manually selecting a store. Once this is done, I will then complete the wizard. As you can see, the certificate has been successfully imported. However, it will not work as expected. To understand why, I will open MMC and add the certificate snap-in, and select Computer Account when prompted. This will allow me to view all the certificates that are available to this computer. Before I look at the certificate that I just imported, I will first have a look at which root CAs are currently stored in the local certificate store. To do this, I will expand Trusted Root Certification Authorities and have a look inside the certificate container. In here you can see the root certificate for HighCost Training, which I will select and export. In the Certificate Export wizard, I will accept all the defaults when prompted and save the certificate to the removable USB media. Once the certificate has been exported, I will go back to the certificate snap-in. Notice that in Trusted Root Certification Authorities, there is no certificate for ITFreeTraining, even though I have imported one. If I expand into Intermediate Certification Authorities, notice that the certificate for ITFreeTraining can be found in here. If I open the certificate, notice that there is a message indicating that the certificate is not trusted. Windows has placed this certificate in the wrong store. In order for the certificate to be trusted, it needs to be added to the Trusted Root Certification Authorities. To do this, I will exit out of the Properties, right-click the certificate and select Cut. I then open the Trusted Root Certification Authorities and select the Paste option. The certificate will then be moved to the Trusted Root Certificate Store. The server has the required certificate installed, and the certificate from this network has been exported to the USB removable drive. I will now change back to the other Windows server in ITFreeTraining. On the ITFreeTraining server, I will add the certificate for HighCost Training just like I did for the ITFreeTraining certificate on the HighCost Training server. To do this, I will open Windows Explorer and select the HighCost Training certificate on the USB removable media. Right-click it and select the option Install Certificate to start the Certificate Import Wizard. Once the wizard has started, I will select the option for Local Machine and move on to the next screen of the wizard. On the next screen, rather than let Windows decide where the certificate should be stored, I will instead press the Browse button and then select Trusted Root Certification Authorities when prompted to ensure that it is put in the correct location. Once this is done, it is just a matter of completing the wizard to import the certificate. Now that the certificate has been imported, I will now close all the extra windows that I opened. Once done, I will select the Tools menu and then select ADFS Management. Now that the certificates have been installed, I can expand down to Relying Party Trusts, right-click it, and select Add Relying Party Trust, as I did previously. Once again, I will enter in the name of the HighCost Training Federation Server. This time, when I press Next, the wizard will proceed without any problems. On the next screen, I will enter in a display name for the trust. This should be a descriptive name that describes the trust. On the next screen of the wizard, I need to configure the default permissions for the trust. By default, the option Permit all users to access this relying party is selected. This will allow any user to access the trust, even if no permissions have been configured for them. In this case, I will select the second option, Deny all users access to this relying party. This will deny all users access to the trust unless they have been specifically given access to the trust. This gives better security, but it does mean the administrator will need to configure who can use the trust. Once I press Next to move on to the next screen of the wizard, that screen will show me all the information that will be used for the trust. You can see that there is a lot of information. Some of it is obtained locally, and some of it is obtained from the other server. Once I press Next, the trust will be created. On the last screen of the wizard is the tick box Open the Edit Claim Rules dialog for this relying party trust when the wizard closes. This will open the properties of the trust when I close the wizard. However, I will clear this tick box so that I can show you how to do this step manually. Once I close the wizard, the new trust will be displayed under Relying Party Trust. If I right-click the trust, I have the option to Edit Claim Rules, which, when selected, will open the properties of the rules of the trust. The rules have 3 tabs. The first tab is Issuance Transform Rules. This tab allows data to be transformed before being sent to the other party. For example, you could create a custom rule that modifies the data retrieved from Active Directory and sends it to the other party in a different format. The tab Delegation Authorization Rules allows rules to be created that determine if a requester is allowed to impersonate another user. In this case, I will create a new rule on the tab Issuance Authorization Rules. To do this, I need to press the button Add Rules to start the rule creation wizard. To create the rule, I first need to select a template. Notice that in the list, there are a lot of different templates to choose from. The rules created in here determine who can use the trust. If there is no matching rule in here, then the user will be denied access. In this case, I will select the option Send Group Membership as a Claim. This will allow authentication to happen based on group membership. Once selected, I will move on to the next screen where I need to configure some information about the rules. First, I will enter in a meaningful name for the claim. Once entered, I will next configure a group for the claim by pressing the Browse button. In this case, I will use the Domain Users group. If you want to restrict access to particular users, you will need to create your own group and put the users whom you want to have access to the trust in that group. In this case, there are 2 domains in the forest, so 2 domain users groups have been found. In this case, I will select the domain users group in the domain ITFreeTraining. The next option that I will configure is under Outgoing Claim Type. You will notice that there are a lot of options here. The option you choose here will determine what the other side will see. In this particular case, I will select Group. However, a different option can be chosen if you want to change what the other party was seeing. At the bottom, notice that you can enter in the value for the claim. In this case, I will enter in Web Application. Essentially, this will accept the group name, Domain Users, and change it to the group name, Web Application. As far as the other party is aware, the group name is Web Application. Once I press Finish, the rule will be created. If I exit out of Edit Claim Rules, notice that the new Relying Party Trust has been configured. Since the rule has been created, it is ready to go. However, before this will work, the Claim Provider Trust must be created on the other side. But I will leave that to an upcoming video. I hope you've enjoyed this video from ITFreeTraining and found it informative. I hope to see you in future videos from this course and others. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching.